What? I'm ready.
Are you good to go? But Bill, how much? Oh. I need to.
See that?
Hey.
No, we're talking about that.
Yep, let's hope.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The time is now 5:03. The Warwick Finance Committee is open and for business. And may I have a motion for acceptance of the minutes for the meeting held April 4th, 2022?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. On to the bid package, PCR 44-21. The first bid is 2023-026, network connectivity. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening. Chris Kate, I'm the network manager for MIS. This is a request under City Ordinance 56-6 to award $294,600 to Cox Communications and FiberTech Holdings Group, also known as Crown Castle, to extend the current contract through June 30th, 2023. Cox and Crown Castle provide network equipment, configuration, and support services that unify the city's various buildings into one large network. While Cox provides a majority of those transport services, Crown Castle more specifically provides the dark fiber for certain buildings that required that physical connection. MIS is currently in the process of information gathering to develop appropriate specifications for the next generation, the next version of the city's network. This process has taken longer than expected, and given current industry-wide supply chain issues relating to the procurement of network equipment, this necessitates an extension of the current agreements to ensure continuity of existing city network services. Cox has agreed to maintain its current pricing, and we're currently on a month-to-month schedule with Crown Castle. A note to that effect, at least with Cox Communications, is attached. There isn't a current contract with Crown Castle. We just pay month-to-month. The budget code to cover these expenses will be 25-307, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Chris. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from members of the council? Are there any questions from members of the public? Thank you. The next item on the bid is bid 2022-406, State of Rhode Island Telephone Services. Once again, Chris, how are you?
Again, Chris Kate, network manager for MIS. This is a 5610 request to utilize State of Rhode Island APA 20254 for telephone and call center systems, and award Cox Communications for 24 months in the amount of $252,000. The two-year contract will run May 1st, 2022 through April 30th, 2024, with the option of 2 one-year contract extensions. Cox Communications is the current provider of voice services for the city, and these services include telephone hardware, phone system configuration, as well as maintenance and support. While the existing bid will end May 31st, MIS has decided to begin the new contract a month early to take advantage of improved pricing. The new agreement features a lower overall cost per phone or per seat. This will reduce the monthly phone charges to the city by $580.40 per month, or $13,959.60 over the initial 24 months. The budget code to cover this will be 25-303. Any questions, please?
Thank you, Chris. Any questions from members of the committee? Councilman Gebhardt.
Hey, Chris, thanks. I just want to clarify in here. So does this cover the hardware for each user as well, or is that a separate line?
It does, yes. Yep, in fact, the phones are going to be upgraded.
Okay, so they get a with like a basic device, or
It would be, Cox has 2 or 3 different offerings for phones. This would not be the base model. It's a tier up.
okay. So that's their software seat, their line or direct dial extension, and then the hardware. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And then you mentioned call center in here. Do we have any actual call centers, or are you really talking more about just the overall package?
Yeah, it's really the overall package. Cox maintains its own call centers for support. If we have an issue on our end, we can contact them for support. We don't have a formal call center here, but hunt groups and auto attendants, and yeah.
Got it. And this covers they do the configuration also for okay. All right, great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from members of the council? Councilman Lattisaw.
Thank you, Chairman. On this item, you say Cox Communication is the current provider of voice services for the city. These services include telephone hardware, phone system configuration, maintenance, and support. Could you elaborate a little more on the voice services part of it? What particularly is voice services?
That's anything involving not just the desk phones that the city employees use, but also all of the back-end systems that are required to interconnect those telephones. These days, instead of having an on-site PBX or some large piece of hardware that provides that, the brains, so to speak, for the whole operation, a lot of that is done through the cloud on Cox's end. And so really anything, not just the telephones for the end users, but also call groups. So if someone calls a particular department, for instance, MIS, there's a call group that the main number goes to, it's directed to, and then you can set a call path for that group. Which extensions are going to ring first? Do they ring simultaneously? Do you have one after the other? Those sorts of things.
You just made me think of something else. So these phone calls that we're talking about, whether they're interoffice, interdepartmental, whether a member of the community calls into a particular department, or one of the members of the council calls into a particular department on the city phones. Are those phone calls recorded?
Those phone calls are not recorded.
They are not recorded?
That's correct. Not to the best of my knowledge, they are not recorded.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have call records that we can pull if needed, but we do not record those calls.
Call records, meaning one
inbound,
phone number to another?
Right. Inbound and outbound call records.
But it does not maintain the actual conversations.
Correct. There is not I'm not aware of a recording or a transcription of a conversation.
Okay. The telephone hardware, could you talk about that a little bit, please? A little bit further on telephone hardware. Keep in mind, I grew up with the Canon string, so this technology stuff is new. It's a bit, confusing sometimes. So could you just do that in the white hair version?
Oh, sure. I grew up with rotary and dial tone phones, so I can recall a little bit. These phones are programmable phones. They can be configured by Cox Communications and then sent out to wherever it needs to be deployed, so that once it's plugged in, it will actually reach out to the internet and communicate with the Cox backend. And all of instead of having a hard-coded key to dial a particular extension, it's all done in software, which makes it very easy to change the programming of the buttons on the fly. If you want it to call a group of people versus a single person, I can call Cox and have them change that programming on the back end. It's all very easy to change that way.
And I think I just heard you say that you grew up with a rotary phone.
I did, yeah.
Well, it has been said that sometimes I might have short-term memory, but with what you just said from here, I would have never guessed that you were old enough to be my brother. Or maybe even my son. It doesn't appear to be so from here, but good for you.
We had both.
But thank you for that. And you also indicate here that there's about a $14,000 savings. I know it's not a huge amount of money given a $250,000 bid, but I do appreciate you informing us of at least some type of savings on this. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I'm all set, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from members of the council? Questions from members of the public? Members of the public? Thank you. Bid number 3 is 2023-027, Police Radio Circuits. Chris, you got the top 3 picks this night.
I appreciate it. Once again, Chris Kate for MIS, Network Manager. This is a request under City Ordinance 56-6 to award Verizon Business Network Services in the amount of $120,000 for radio communication circuits for the Warwick Police Department. These circuits are used in the police department's dispatch system to enable critical public safety communications, as an example, between the dispatch center and officers on duty. The police department is developing a replacement to their current radio communications system, and until that new system is production ready, ready for prime time, maintaining the current communication system is essential. And to that end, MIS requests another 12 months of funding from July 1st of this year through June 30th, 2023, to ensure that the current services continue while the police department proceeds with an upgrade strategy. And the budget code to cover this will be 30-303.
Thank you so much. Any questions from members of the committee? Questions from members of the council? Councilman Lattisaur.
Thank you. Over here, you say to that end, MIS requests another 12 months of funding from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. So am I to assume that the previous extension was for 1 year as well?
I'm not sure about the current, it was a previous? That is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Questions from any other members of the council? Questions from the public? Questions from the public? Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The next bid is 2022-409. Renovations and repair to the therapy pool. This is found on page 11. And we will hear a question to the solicitor. Should we go to 2022-199 first, or should we hear this bid and then revert back? Doesn't matter. Okay, thank you. We'll go to 409. Hi, Christy.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Public Works is requesting to award a 56-6 to New England Aquatics for the repairs at the therapy pool at McDermott. The reason we are requesting a 56-6 at this point, we had gone out to bid 2 times previously. The first bid did not receive any responses. The second bid received one only from New England Aquatics. There's some issue with the way the bid is, not issue with the way the bid is written, but in the bid, it does not allow us to provide funds up front for a project. However, after some discussion with the administration, purchasing agent, and obviously this is not normal protocol, we're asking to award this bid under a 56-6 so we can get this project moving. We would provide the vendor with an initial down payment of $13,650, and then the balance would be paid upon completion of the renovations to the pool.
Thank you, Christy. I'm going to go to, are there any questions for members of the committee? Councilman Gebhardt.
I'll just, thanks. Hi, Christy. So what do you attribute the lack of attention or interest in working on this one for? Is it specialized or?
It is. We've actually, the director had reached out to some other area pools and, to see who they would utilize, and everyone said, you need to call New England Aquatics. You should call New England Aquatics. So they're basically one of the only companies in this area, or at least in Rhode Island, that does this type of renovation work to aquatic facilities. Just because of the nature of what it is, it's not like we can just hire a general contractor to come in and expect that they'll understand what needs to be done in a pool when you have to involve the Department of Health and you have guidelines and regulations you have to follow.
And so they're essentially saying, if we do the work, then you need to give us some down payment up front, and then.
They're going to do the work. They were going to do the work under the bid the way it was written, but because we can't, and we can kind of sympathize with their position, the way that economically it is right now with them getting material or expecting payment, they may have to front some money on, not, to buy the material that we're requesting them to, redo the pool. So that was the agreement that was come up with, and we just needed to. It's the exact same scope of work. It's the exact same price. It's the exact same vendor. It's just that because of the way our bids are written, we couldn't pay them anything to get the project started.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from members of the council? Councilman Lattisaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, Christie.
Hi.
Christie, what are the repairs that need to be done to this pool?
This is the same thing that we had gone over previously when the bid itself was presented to the council. The therapy pool is going to be retiled. It's going to be reworked. And I didn't bring the scope of work with me this time, but it's this. We had this discussion when we originally had asked to award the bid. That I can probably pull up the specifications on my phone. I just don't have them with me right now.
We discussed this previously. Previously was some time ago, and there's nothing in our binder help here. It doesn't speak specifically to what it is, so I don't remember what it was. That's why I'm asking what it includes. What is the start date of this work?
The start date would be if we can issue them this initial payment of $13,650. They will get the material and they will start immediately.
And have they indicated to you in writing how long it's going to take them to get whatever materials they need?
No,
Do you have any idea how long it's going to take them to get whatever materials they need?
I don't.
Do they have a complete, what materials do they need?
Give me 1 second. I'm sorry, bear with me. I know
So, no, that's okay. Councilman, if you look at, where bid 2022-199, the request to rescind, there is information, if specifically, if you go to page 20 in your packet, it does break down some of the cost. It doesn't go specifically to the items, but it does say, item number 1 is renovations to therapy pool per bid spec. Item number 2 is engineering services, and then, of course, with engineering.
No, I understand that, Chairman. Thank you for that. I
Yeah.
did notice that, but it only points out engineering services for $2,000. I'd like to know what it is that I'm going to be voting for in terms of materials, because right now, we've said it numerous times, all materials are very difficult to get. Some of them more than others, and I'd just like to get a sense as to when we can expect these materials, what the start date will be, so we have an idea when this pool is going to begin getting repaired, and what the completion date is. I think those are, those are questions that I have anyways, that I'd like to have answered.
I understand. I do want to go on record, just identify that this item was voted for at the meeting of November 1st, 2021, and it was heard at the meeting. I do understand that you're asking for the question specific to the repairs, which was discussed in November. We're basically looking there's not an increase in the reward. And whether or not we get that information, the sooner we get this taken care of, the sooner that pool can be fixed. I'm not questioning that. I just feel that we've already touched on what the repairs would be from November 1st, 2021. But I'll refer back to Christie if you have that information for the councilman.
That's fine, Chairman. That was 6 months ago or 7 months ago. It would have been pretty easy just to include it in this package, which it's not. So I'm just looking to have that spoken to again as to what it is. Christie, another quick question. So how long has this therapeutic pool been actually out of service?
This pool has been closed since COVID started.
Since when?
COVID started,
So this is like over 2 years?
yes.
And how come it's been closed so long? I mean, I understand that we need to get materials, we need to get vendors, but this is over 2 years it's been closed.
This was tasked back to the Department of Public Works when the mayor took office to maintain these facilities. I do not have I don't have an answer as to why they weren't, it wasn't opened before that. It was not under the purview of Public Works.
Is that something that is, used often by a lot of our residents?
Yes, particularly the elderly.
Right. Okay. And for what it's worth, I don't have a problem with the 25% deposit as an isolated matter. I do want to point out that this wouldn't be something that I would like to have as some new protocol, because you're introducing more paperwork, you're introducing more work from the finance department for, various staff people here, in terms of A, getting a payment request, B, getting vouchers done, getting checks cut, get this sent out. Somebody's going to record it coming in. This is not something that's going to just cost you a couple dollars. So I'm concerned, or I just want to point out that it's nothing that I would like to see establish, some new protocol here. It's this is like a one-time incident.
This is just a one-time request. This is not a normal thing that we would do. I personally, when it comes to projects like this, I personally handle the payments, the invoices, and things that are associated with these projects.
Do you cut the check as well?
I do not cut the
Okay.
check.
Christie, can you give me, just the top of your head? Obviously, this is nothing that, I don't think any of us remember what materials were included or what items were included
The
in this. Just some
specifications
Top
are,
of your head?
these are the specifications. Renovate 800 square foot gunite pool included pressure test plumbing, remove existing tile, chip out tile line around return lines and drains, remove all loose and hollow plaster and patch, chip out cracks on stabs, remove all loose hollow material and rebuild. Apply scratch coat bond to pool. Waterproof around return lines, drains, and skimmer mounts. Replace return line fittings and drain covers to match new pool finish. Set new 6-inch perimeter tile, including depth tiles and no diving tiles. Tile 2x2 Lake Blue. Set new 4-inch tile trim to the treads of steps, unglazed black tile. Replaster pool with white diamond pebble sheen. Acid wash and polish pebble sheen the day after installation. Replace railing anchors, remove all debris from site. Price includes any permits required, and pricing for engineering services if necessary. Those are the specifications.
Okay, that's pretty extensive. So a lot of this is labor as well into this number. So assuming that this gets approved, when do you think you'll have a start date from the vendor?
I did not have that conversation with him. Our director did. From what I understand, it'll probably take about 6 weeks, with curing times and whatnot.
Sure.
That's what we're anticipating, barring anything, out of the norm. So I would say probably within 2 months, as soon as we get this project started, it will be finished.
All right, thank you, Christie. Christie, would you be so kind as to just notify us on the council when they have given you a start date for the work? I'm assuming that once it's started, the work will just continue through completion. Could you just, so we can answer questions from, our constituents that may or will be calling about this thing getting up and running again?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm all set, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other further questions from the members of the council? Questions from members of the public? Questions from members of the public? Thank you. We'll move on to 2022 I apologize. Council President McAllister. Thank you, Council President. We'll move on to 2022-199, rescinding that bid of renovations and repairs to the therapy pool. I think it's pretty clear cut why we're doing that. You explained it in the previous. If anyone has any questions from the committee? Questions from the council? Questions from the council? Questions from the public? Please step up to the microphone, identify yourself. All questions towards the department will be directed towards the chairperson. Certainly. And just identify.
I'm really loud.
Please.
So, Rick Casella, Ward 1, you said we had the question of whether or not to give them a deposit, and then secondly was the rescinding. So are we taking that bid and tearing it up and start rewriting a new bid that says we're going to give, or we're just adding an addendum to the existing award? You know what I mean?
Rescinding the first bid, and I welcome correction, but it's rescinding the bid that we had, and it's the exact same writing, just going forward with a different plan to get it started.
So it's different writing then. It's going to specifically state in this bid specifically that monies will be dispersed in a specific manner that wasn't in the first bid, correct?
Yes,
So it's totally separate.
yes. We're rescinding the
Yeah.
first bid of 2022-199.
So then we're not really establishing a precedent to add any addendums to existing bids. We're going right back to the beginning.
Yes,
Does that mean we send it out for other people to bid on it again? Because maybe they didn't bid because they weren't getting any money up front. Does that create an unfair advantage? I don't know. I'm sorry, but he was asking questions that made no sense, that you had already been answered. And we had, $650,000 worth of spending on MIS, which is important, and I'm sure every penny's needed. But there were very few questions, so I just wanted to throw out some crazy stuff popped into my head.
This bid was, the original bid was advertised twice. The first bid had no responses. The second bid only had this particular vendor. We awarded it to the vendor, and then we ran into this roadblock that we were trying to work out. We reached out, as I stated earlier, to other venues that have the same type of work, probably other pools, basically, whether, and they use the same vendor we do, which is New England Aquatics. So I don't think it's fair to say that we didn't do our due diligence.
Oh, no.
It's just that there is really nobody else.
And I guess my whole point.
Thank you. Thank you, Christie.
My whole question is, I guess for the solicitor, is if you reestablish a new bid with language specific to this project, and this bid is produced, this package is produced specific to that vendor, does that create any issues for us legally going forward? You understand what I'm saying? Because it's kind of like a non-competitive bid now, because you changed the language. Now it's all brand new. I don't know if that, maybe I'm being follow the blue guy a little bit over the top, but we're just flitting through all this stuff. And
You got to speak into the microphone, please, Mr.
I know you can hear
Sullivan.
me, but anyway, yeah.
So we're really talking about two related items, as you noted with your prior question. The rescinding and the awarding are being done under two particular items. One is Section 612 of the Charter, which allows for an alteration, and under 56.6, we're here to, they're utilizing that exception where there's a work to the disadvantage of the city. In this case, they've done multiple procurements with only one responding vendor. So what's being presented to the committee here by the administration is the awarding of a new contract with these additional terms, substantially similar, but with one major difference as noted by Christie. And it's compliant with the charter and the procurement laws of the ordinances.
What did you say, to the detriment of the city previous to that?
Disadvantage.
What was the language there?
Under the Code of Ordinances 56.6, there's provisions that you need to establish to utilize that provision to have an exception to the newspaper publication and posting of notices for those awards. In this case, typically we encounter this with sole source vendors, but also in this case where multiple procurements have been attempted and only one vendor has come forward previously.
Okay, good. Excellent.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the public? Thank you. Now at this point, I will call for discussion on specific items in the bid package from members of the committee, council, and public. I would like to identify, I'd like to pull bid 2022-069, medical examinations police, to be discussed. Are there any items from members of the committee? Councilman Gebhardt would like to pull and discuss 2022-407, State of Rhode Island Data Communication Services Help Desk. Are there any others, Councilman? Thank you. Councilman Foley? Are there any items that members of the council would like to pull for discussion? Yep. Councilman Lattisaur.
I would like to pull 2023-007 veterinarian services, please. Veterinary services?
2023-007, veterinary services. Thank you.
Yes.
Any others, Councilman?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any others from members of the council? Any items members from the public would like to pull from the bid package to discuss? Are there any items from the bid package members of the public would like to discuss? Please identify yourself.
Rob Cody, Ward 7, 2022-339.
Is that?
I don't see it.
Oh, okay. That, all right, yeah. So To reiterate, we're discussing the bid package. Are there any items from the bid package that before us that members of the public would like to pull? Thank you. So as we did before, we'll just go in order. So we'll start with Councilman Gebhardt, bid 2022-407, State of Rhode Island Data Communication Services. That is found on page 23. Councilman Gebhardt.
Hey, Chris, thanks. I just had a quick question about this. So is the team expanding? Are you adding more agents who are going to help folks, or what's the need for more seats?
Just a moment, Councilman, please. Initially, we wanted to purchase 2 additional licenses for an intern that we had at the time. That internship is now winding down. And also for a project coordinator position that's recently been filled. Even though the current intern's term is winding down, we will be able to occupy that position with, we'll be able to use that second license for another staff member.
Okay.
Once hired. So that's all. It's only 2 additional licenses so that we're not, without being able to license every member of the department, when a ticket comes in, it has to be given to an existing user and then forwarded through some other means, whether it's a voicemail or an email to the user who doesn't have the access license.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just
great.
makes it a little more efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Members of the council? Any questions from members of the public? Thank you. The next item for discussion is from Councilman Lattiser, 2023-007, found on page 26. Correction, I apologize.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yep,
I don't have
29.
I don't have any questions for Ann. Actually, I wanted to compliment you on this bid as well as the one coming up after it, or the one that is listed here also. And I really appreciate the fact that you have gone out of your way and taken the time to research the vendors, to reach out to the vendors who didn't submit a bid, and to ask those questions that I've been hammering away at for probably the last 8 or 9 years. And for me, it's gratifying to see the fact that you did that, and I appreciate it. And people know I don't have a problem asking questions, digging into things, complaining about things, but I also never have a problem with extending the kudos and compliments when I see things being done quite well. And I want to thank you for that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilman. Any questions from members of the committee? Members of the council? Members of the public? Thank you. The next item that will be up for discussion is bid 2022-069, medical examinations of police. This is found on page 40 in your bid package. Good evening, Major.
Good evening. Major Mike Lima, Admin Major, Warwick Police Department. I originally just requested an increase in spending authority of $1,800 on bid 2022-069. I'm actually going to ask to amend that an additional $1,800, so a total amount of $3,600 to be added to the current contract, which expires on September 18th, 2022.
So we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we go continue with the questions. May I have a PCR? It's okay. PCR 45-22. Thank you. And Major, what was the reason for the increase?
We have 7 potential candidates going into the August academy. and we don't have enough money right now to pay for all the psych tests. We have a new process starting, and right off the bat, we've identified 2 police officers from other police departments within the state that we want to potentially hire as well. So there's a good chance I'm not going to use all the 3,600. We're probably only going to use 2,400 of it, but I just wanted to get out ahead of it so I wouldn't have to come back before council again to ask for another increase. In amount.
This is almost what we had this discussion some time ago about the constant moving door of recruitment and where to get police officers in a profession that has definitely seen its challenges and keeping its numbers. So this is just part of that rotation that we were speaking of, especially when it came to the recruitment and the testing and everything else.
Correct. And each applicant, as they move through the hiring process, has to do a psychological exam. So this is what this increase is for.
Thank you. Thank you, Major. Councilman Foley.
More a statement than a question. I want to thank you for your answer to the chair's question. And I sit and I listen, and I don't feel it necessary to reiterate or restate questions that have already been answered. And similarly today, on my time during the day, I reached out to the chief and asked questions of him for anything that was coming in front of us. I just don't feel a need to drag out our meetings with questions that are redundant and have already been answered. Thank you for your time.
So before I go on to the next question, so am I correct in knowing that you want to amend this from a total ask to increase the position from 10,200 to 13,800?
I believe it's 8,400 to 12,000.
84. Oh, because originally it said, oh, okay. Yeah, I added the 36 on top. Okay. So from 8,400, and then you're going to add in the 36. Got it.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Questions from members of the, I'm sorry, solicitor.
I just want to clarify the amount.
Certainly.
Contract award increase is going to go from, we're adding $1,800 to adding how much?
It's going to be another 18. So it's, see if you, in the first one, I saw his original request at 10,002. So I added the 3,600, but it's really, I'm adding the 3,600 to 84. So it's going to be 12. That is going to be the total amount requested, correct, Major?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from members of the council? Councilman Lattisaw.
Thank you. Major, how many officers have we hired since June?
We have done since June, I know we've done 9 exams. In one of those exams, that recruit at the academy failed out. So we've hired 8 so far.
And you've done 9 out of the 14 exams? Is that it?
Correct.
And you need to do another, what, 9 more?
Potentially. We definitely have 7 that are slated to go to the August Academy. And we have 2 other potential candidates that have just applied in the last week. That would be basically lateral transfers. They would not have to go to the academy, but they still have to pass our background check, which includes the psychological exam.
Sure. And Major, how many, you said, taking into consideration anticipated retirements, how many anticipated retirements do you have?
We have 3 right now. So this number, that 7 number plus that 2 number would actually bring us up for probably the first time since I can remember to our complement of 175.
I know you've been struggling getting to that complement for a long time. I know that. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Major. I'm all set, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Solicitor?
I just wanted to clarify after reconfirming with purchasing the amendment that is being requested to PCR 4422, I guess it's now PCR 4522, is that the award would be changed from 1,800 to 3,600.
Yes. Therefore, in the top of the cover letter, it says that the request to increase PCR 9721 sub A was originally 8,400 to 10.2, but now it'll go from 8,400 to 12.
Correct.
Yes.
But for the purposes of the amendment to be
Amendment,
offered,
right.
It would be the 1,800 to 3,600.
Understood. I just wanted to get all the numbers right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Major. Oh, I apologize. Any other questions from members of the council? Questions from members of the public? Questions from members of the public? Thank you. So now, before we move on to consent, let's have a vote on this. If I may have a motion on PCR 45-22 as, or with amendment.
So I move for the amendment in the dollar amount of an additional $3,600. Nope, I'm sorry, go ahead. Thank you, Solicitor. Go ahead. How should it be worded?
So we'll move
There you go.
from 1,800 to 3,600 total.
So the motion has been made to increase.
Second.
Yep, the motion has been made on 45-22, PCR 45-22. Seconded?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now I will move PCR 45-22 as amended.
Move favorable action.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Now, if I may have a motion on the full consent calendar.
I move favorable action.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you to the committee, thank you, Solicitor, and everyone. Directors, thank you. We now move on to the regular committee agenda. If I may have a motion for acceptance of the minutes from the committee meeting held on April 4th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. PCR 44-22 was already voted on, so therefore we'll go to PCR 39-22, formerly 2022-339, Fire Department Promotional Exams. Good evening, Chief. You have the floor.
This was a request for bid number 2022-339 to be awarded to what formerly was ID number 30, which now is being awarded to Fire Service Testing Company out of Apollo Beach, Florida. Current bid expires on 6/7/22. We're looking for a 2-year award in an amount not to exceed $20,000.
Thank you, Chief. Questions from members of the committee? Questions from members of the council? Councilman Lattisaw?
Thank you, Chairman. Chief, has the department ever used a different code for these training, for the testing, other than 35-390?
I don't believe so. As long as I've been the assistant chief, it's been used the same fire service test and it's been the code we've used.
Okay. I'm looking at this, this bid. And, hold on 1 minute. How many custom questions will you have on this test?
Typically, we use, I would say, about a quarter of the test of material, so about 25 questions, but never more than a third. So that would be somewhere between 25 and 33 questions, with a typical about 25.
So there's 100 questions on the test?
There is, yes.
Okay, so 25 to 33 could be custom questions.
Correct.
And it states here in column or item 3, it says that $25 includes 10% custom questions drawn from jurisdiction-specific materials. The $25, is that a charge per test, or is that a flat fee of $25?
That's per question. So if
question.
we have 25 questions that are custom, they're giving us 10 for the flat, for the standard charge, and then the 15 questions additional would be $25 each.
15 questions additional.
Right, because the first 10 are included in the price of the test. That's the 10%.
And the section down below, it says, well, actually, let's go to item 4. Item 4 says, in additional fees, $695, note 1. And note 1 says, if jurisdiction allows testing, et cetera, and allow the testing company to use same questions on test for other ranks and answers with the answers scrambled, the $695 charge will be waived. Is that something that you're going to be allowing?
We will not utilize that provision. So there is a provision in the bid asking for a price to use what we call unique questions, which means they have to create unique questions every time they do a custom question. But the argument from the testing company was actually valid. They said that actually reduces the effectiveness of the test because the best questions are given out, and then they have to reach, further on, they have to then reach out to try to get not so great questions because they're unique. So their argument, we did talk to them back and forth, and we won't be utilizing the unique question feature, so we won't be incurring that charge.
So the $695 is not going to be factored in?
Correct.
Just the $25 for potentially 15 to 20 custom questions over the 10%?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you're asking for, I believe, yeah, you are $20,000 for this testing. How did you come about $20,000? What did you use as a basis for coming up with the $20,000 request?
So we run 10 promotional exams over that 2-year period. I calculated out the flat fee for the exam. I added $500 for custom questions to each price. I estimated the amount of eligible people to take that promotional exam. For each of those exams, there's a certain amount of firefighters that are eligible to take that exam in that rank. Added that number to the per student question, and then came up with a total. And if I add it all together, in total, it comes to about $19,088, somewhere in that range.
And in the past, has that been the same rationale for requesting the amounts that you've requested in the past for testing?
It has.
Same formulas?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh. And how long have you been doing this?
I've been the assistant chief since for about 3 years now, so April of 2019.
And you're comfortable in saying that's always been the protocol for the process leading up to the request for this particular item?
Yeah, in reviewing the documentation from previous assistant chiefs, they use a similar formula to mine to try to anticipate the costs.
So, Chief, as you know, and some of my colleagues know, typically I dig into the numbers. And I have researched not only this item, other items that have come up before us that have, requests made in the past for monies. And I have researched this particular item, 35,390, going back to 2006. I have all those budget books going back to 2006. I kind of like keep them for souvenir, I guess. I don't know. The most that the department has ever used for testing since 2006, or 16 years, the most that has ever been spent is $9,550, and that was in 2020. There are other years where, as an example, in 2021, you budgeted $8,000 and you pretty much used it all. You used $7,663. To date, from 2021 to 2022, you had a budget of $12,000, and to date, as of today, you've used $7,494. And these are typically been 2-year bids, as the chief recently pointed out to me that since 2013, there have been 5 bids that the fire department has brought before this council. In 2016, there was no monies budgeted, but there was an expense of $7,393. Same thing occurred in 2014, nothing budgeted, but an expense of $6,699. In 2013, 12, and 11, this budget code didn't exist at all, which is why I asked if there had ever been a new budget code. This code didn't exist. It didn't show up in the financial documents from the city at all. So this brings me full circle to ask you, why are you asking this council for an approval of $20,000, which the most you've ever used, which was a little less than 2 years ago, is $9,550? Because you've been using the same formula, the same process leading up to these numbers. So how does it go from 2021, an $8,000 budget, to 2021-22, a $12,000 budget, where in 2021 you had 8,000 requested, you used 7663, and in 21-22 your budget was 12 and you used 7494. So that's the question. Why is it you need $20,000 when the most you've ever spent is $9,550?
So the numbers that I give you and that we work out in the formula is a worst case scenario. So that's if every test goes off and every member that's eligible to take the test takes the test. That isn't always the case. There's many cases where we don't have a promotional exam because we don't have anybody eligible in that rank. There's many times where we get half the amount of people that are eligible that actually apply to take the exam. So the number that we give you, the $20,000, is my calculation of worst case scenario. With the current bargaining agreement that's in place with the union, that's what stipulates how we run the tests and how often and when. In the current CBA that we have using our calculations, this would be the worst case scenario, the most that I would spend in a 2-year period. So if I spend $7,000 to $9,000 a year, over 2 years, we're spending $14,000 to $18,000. The difference is probably the number of test takers and maybe a test or two that wasn't administered because there was nobody eligible to take the test.
So are you requesting spending authority up to $20,000?
That's correct.
Okay. So to be clear, if this is approved, spending authority up to $20,000 and you only spend $10,000, it's not like that remaining $10,000 is going to get rolled over into another line item. This is strictly spending authority up to.
Correct. This is spending authority, not budgetary line.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for those answers. I appreciate it. Thank you,
You're
Chairman.
welcome.
I'm all set.
Thank you so much, Councilman. Any other questions from members of the council? Are there any questions on PCR 39-22 from members of the public? I do know that there was a constituent Just please identify yourself, and then please direct all questions through the committee. Thank you.
It's Rob, Ward 7. I had some similar questions. Let me ask the chair a couple of questions. Prior to this coming before the Finance Committee, Mr. Howe, were you able to research the line item? Is it typical that you research to see how much money has been spent in the previous year?
I'm looking at the budget before me, and that's what I went on. The bid request before me.
No, so I guess this is like a yes or no. When a bid comes before you, I'm just trying to get what the protocol is. Do you look and see what was spent in the previous year?
On this one, I did not, and I'll tell you why, because I know that all the chair people and the administrative people who work for the administration understand that there's a strict guideline on the spending of that budget.
Okay. So I'm assuming that you're familiar with the Munis report?
I am.
Can I, through the clerk, can I give you a copy of the current Munis report? I have a question on it. Just like to give this to you as a courtesy so you can see this.
That's fine. Thank you.
And then here's 2 copies of the Munis report. Thanks. So if you look at the Munis report, when you look at the bid packet, it calls out that this is the line item 35,390. Could you look at that line item 35,390 and tell me what the current Munis report indicates it as?
Since you brought it up, I'm gonna ask you to state what you wanted to say.
Okay. So the current Munis report, as of last week, in item 390 indicates lease office space. It doesn't indicate fire promotional tests. I didn't know if anyone was aware of that.
I'm going to pause for a moment and refer to the solicitor. Not questioning on this. Is this allowed to be discussed considering that it's not on the agenda?
Well, it's the line item.
I'm asking my solicitor.
I haven't seen the document that was shared, but if the finance department or anybody else wants to confirm that it is what it purports to be, it is a related question to the item as to where the funds come from. So it is something that can be discussed as it relates to this particular bid.
Okay. And just for the record, I do have the 2 copies given to us to 3 members on the committee. And there we go.
I have a third one if you need it for the other member of the committee.
No, we're good. Chief, is there anything you wanted to address on that?
As far as I know, line 35,390 in the city budget is fire service testing. What the Munis report says and what column is reflected.
What was the number? I apologize.
35,390. It's fire service testing. That's what it is in the budget. And how Munis reflects that, what column he may be looking at that reflects a lease of facilities is beyond my scope.
So the reason I asked that, Mr. Chairman, is because the bid specifically states that the money will come from line item 35, which is the Department 390. And the current Munis report, which I got through public records dated April 5th, calls out item 390 as lease for office space. So the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is obviously there's an error here somewhere. And to substantiate that error, if you look at the first page on line item 236, it calls out for the fire department supplies for the target range. I don't think the fire department is involved in the target range. And it also calls out in the very first line, line 105, salaries for crossing guards at $16,125,000. So the official Munis report has some serious errors in it. and this is the report that's distributed to the council members, in which to seek their due diligence on line items to see how much is being expended. So this is an official city document that clearly has some problems associated with, whether they're data input problems or some type of computer glitch. But tonight, the fire department has come before the city council to draw monies for fire testing services, fire promotional test out of item 35390, which states lease office space. So we can get to that later. You guys can discuss it. I'm sure it's some type of computer program. But the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is that this official city document has some major problems with it, both in input and in financial data. So the reason I ask that is, so if I was in your position as the finance chair on the finance council and things were coming before me for expenditures, I would use this report, as Mr. Lattisaw said, to see what was expended last year, which was one of my questions. And I also look back all the way to 2010, and the amount of monies that have been allocated for this line item have never been expended. So I have serious doubts that this will be expended. And if you recall, we had that question, the same type of a question with the medical examinations, where we were given like $70,000 and it was never being used. So one of my questions was, since that $70,000 is not being used, why don't we do a transfer resolution for this money as opposed to allocating more monies, right? It's clear all the way back to 2010, those monies on that line item 335 were never used. Just transfer the money. Why do we have to pad another line item? That seems kind of foolish. But also, I'd just like to just go on the record, in view of the debacle that happened at the last meeting, where we actually found out historically that this has been a violation of the Rhode Island state laws. I'm glad that
Mr. Cody,
Yeah.
we're speaking about the bid at hand, not last week's meeting.
Well, this is the same bid at hand.
Well,
Same bid at hand.
We're speaking about the bid at hand today.
Right.
As it was presented by the administration,
Yep.
not last week's meeting.
And this is relevant. I know you don't want to hear it, but it's relevant.
Well, not the false accusations.
So what I did, and I think this is important for you to know, because I know I would want to know it if I was sitting in your position. So after the last meeting on April 5th, I took 4 minutes of my time and I Googled fire testing promotional services, fire promotional tests, and a number of companies came up. And I clicked one of them and got the phone number for Fire Service Testing Company out of Lakeland, Florida, and I made a phone call. And I said, hey, did you guys answer an RFP for the city of Warwick for a fire promotional test? And the young lady, Adriana, said, oh, yes, we did. Here's the bid number, and here's how much we offered, $1,210. Okay, thank you very much. And I made 2 other phone calls to other companies that gave me the same information. But then, following up with due diligence because of what we had last week and some of the comments that were made, if you look on the piece of paper, the second sheet that I gave you, I just did a very quick online Secretary of State search of the company. When I did that, I found out that the name of the owner, we share the same last name with a very prominent Warwick Fire Department family. So if I was on the council, having known that we just found out that what we were doing was illegal under state law, I would want to do everything I could to make sure that I wasn't jeopardized in a conflict of interest. Now, I'm hoping that that is just a coincidence, but the name's not Smith or Jones. But I would suggest that the council, based on this information, based on the debacle of last week, which has really compromised everything, I think that you should just look into it. Because we cannot keep doing business like this. I mean, this is a black eye on everybody. And I know nobody wants to see that, but over this period of time, we've had how many council members, how many lawyers on the council, how many council solicitors, and Nobody knew that we were procuring bids in direct violation of Rhode Island state law on municipal bid procurement. And nobody knew that we were violating the Warwick City Charter. Nobody knew that. But then when it's brought to your attention, the individual that brings it to your attention to try to be helpful gets vilified, in the newspapers. So I would suggest that for the purposes to ensure that there's no conflict of interest, as a courtesy, I've come and I've given you some documentation which is readily available online that I found within 3 minutes. I would just do a little quick search. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from members of the committee? Questions? Oh, excuse me. Oh, I apologize. Members of the public, any other further questions from members of the public?
I'm not sure that you can imagine what it feels like to hear this kind of stuff week after week. And
Oh, may you identify, I apologize, identify yourself, please?
Cindy Wilson.
Thank you.
So the look of, you're the head of the committee, the look on your face when something comes up that you don't like is just horrifying as a citizen to watch because you're so clearly annoyed with the truth.
Well, first,
It wasn't
ma'am,
fake what he said, it
ma'am,
was true and he proved it.
Ma'am,
Yeah, here we go, here we go.
I'm-
You hate what I'm saying, so go ahead, shut me up. That's all you
Ma'am.
do. You know what, you are actually pathetic.
ma'am,
Don't ma'am me, just shut it.
thank you, ma'am. Very good. Otherwise, Chairman, thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the public? Thank you. May I have a motion?
I move favorable action.
Second.
We have a motion for favorable. We have a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 That concludes the Finance Committee for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
The next committee to meet is the Ordinance Committee. And that is able to take place now.
Take my pen too, Mr. Cody. My pen too.
No, I didn't.
Like,
There wasn't one up there. I'm serious. I have my gel pen.
So ordinance will convene at 6:19 PM. We have acceptance of minutes from the committee meeting held on April 4th, 2022. Do we have a motion? Oh, good point. Well, second then. Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. One abstention. Next, we have PCO 8-22, an ordinance to prohibit parking on the northerly side of Narragansett Bay Avenue, west of Crawford Avenue. This is Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Chairman. So there is a police study, traffic study accompanying this PCO. This is an issue that kind of goes in line with many of the other, I'll call illegal no parking signs throughout the city that the mayor and his administration are working hard to get corrected. This was brought to my attention, and that's what prompted the traffic study. So there's no right now there is no parking signs on both sides of the street. This area is in a public access area, which is, it's not being used extensively, but it is being used by some locals and possibly some folks from outside the city of Warwick or outside of my ward. The issue at hand here for me is not wanting to restrict or eliminate the public's ability to access public access areas. And what we're doing here is putting no parking signs on the north side of Narragansett Bay Avenue. That is where the residential properties are located. There is from Crawford to the end of Narragansett Bay Avenue, I think it's 2 or 3 houses. There's some driveways on that side which you can't park in front of or across from anyways. Leaving the south side access to X number of cars, I don't know the exact number, it could be 4 or 5 cars perhaps, that would still have parking available to them and also allow folks to be able to take advantage of that public access. So I think this is in fairness to all involved. Certainly makes sense to me, and I would respectfully request favorable action. Thank you.
All right, so this is supported by a traffic study. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Any questions or comments from members of the council? Any questions or comments from members of the public? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Favorable action.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That appears to conclude Ordinance Committee at 6:22 PM.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next committee to meet is the Intergovernmental Committee. And just for the members of the audience, there is a sign-up sheet on the podium. At the beginning of the regular council meeting at 7 PM, we do have public comment. So if you'd like to make public comment, you can just sign up on the sheet on the podium. Thank you.
It is now 6:25 and the Intergovernmental Committee is now in session.
So I move favorable action on the minutes from the April 4th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
You still gotta do the vote thingy, and I can vote.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I abstain. The first order of business is PCR 158-21, a resolution to the General Assembly requesting amendment of the Warwick City Charter to establish new elected January 2025. I believe this was spoken about in length at the last meeting. Are there any questions from the committee?
Just more of a statement than a question. So at the last meeting, I proposed the amendment to make it 4 years for the council members as far as the term. The motion failed on a 4-4 vote. I don't want to reintroduce it if it's just going to waste time. So if you'd be in favor of it, given that you were the one lone absent member, feel free to either state so or introduce the amendment. Otherwise, I'll just leave it lie.
No, my feeling is to keep it as I originally introduced it. 2-year terms for council members.
Works for me.
Any other questions from the council? Mr. Ricks?
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to reiterate all of my comments from the last meeting, although I didn't quite have an opportunity to finish. those comments. But I suppose just to summarize those previous comments, I see this as, well, in certain parts, there are quite a few items that this resolution intends to accomplish, various changes it intends to make. I take issue with the legislative term limits in that they negatively affect the ability of this body to have institutional knowledge. There are also concerns that I have that really we already have term limits. We are up for re-election every 2 years, and the people decide whether or not they want us to continue to represent them. For those same reasons, depriving the people of a choice as to whom they have on the ballot is really a matter of taking power away from the people and diminishing the power of the legislative body. I don't know how we could have accomplished through the city council what we have in recent years without being able to learn from the wisdom of members of this body who have served for quite a long period of time, whether that be members that I started with, and many of us started with, including Joe Solomon, Steve Marola, Joe Galucci, and Donna Travis, who is currently serving on the city council. I think that we're all better off from learning from the experience that they've brought. But I want to focus my comments right now on my concerns about the 2-year and 4-year formulas. If we take a look at Congress and the United States Constitution, there was math. There was a lot of thought behind why is it that the House of Representatives has 2-year terms, presidency has 4-year terms, and Senate has 6-year terms. Well, I think that we need to put a lot of thought and consideration into why is it that currently the city council terms of 2 years match the mayor's term of 2 years. Well, first concern that I have really boils down to changing this formula is a recipe to increase the risk of corruption. The state code of ethics has a 1-year ban called the revolving door. So what that means is that a member of this city council, during our terms in office, we can't be seeking employment with the city, and also we can't be seeking or taking employment with the city for a 1-year period after we finish serving our terms. Now, I don't think that any member of this council, I don't think that our mayor, I don't think that anyone elected has any bad intentions. Certainly no bad intentions in the introduction of this resolution. Absolutely not. I have no concern about that. But this is something that changes the city charter and affects us going forward forever into the future until the city charter is changed again, which happens very rarely and should happen very rarely. This ethical concern arises in that when we have a new formula for how long the terms are for members of the city council and how long the term is for the mayor, we're walking into a situation where if there's an election and that council person, for instance, knows that they are term limited or otherwise they don't intend to run for another term, there can arise a temptation for both that member of the council and for the executive to make a corrupt bargain in which a job is promised in exchange for patronage or for otherwise voting however the executive wants that person to vote. I'm not suggesting that anything of that sort is happening right now. Absolutely not. But The reason why we have preventative laws on the books, such as the 1-year revolving door as part of the state code of ethics, is because it's warranted to have preventative measures to prevent that kind of risk from occurring or discourage that kind of activity. When you have a 4-year mayoral term, 2-year council term, as opposed to terms that match up, now that risk is being increased. Because if some sort of deal were to be struck, and again, I'm talking in the future, because this is a change that's proposed to happen in the future, and I'm talking about folks who are not among us here, and I'm certainly not talking about the current administration, but this is a matter of laying out the rules, laying out what is in our city charter that will govern us for decades and decades in the future. And so when you don't have the terms that match up, you have a situation where under the city charter, you have the mayor continuing the term for 2 years past the end of that city council member's term, leaving a full year for the executive to appoint that outgoing member to a position. Of course, making any kind of deal like that, obviously that would be illegal, but we have preventative measures in place, such as the 1-year revolving door, in order to prevent exactly that. Unless the revolving door is changed to 2 years, and by the way, I don't think that Warwick actually has, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that Warwick itself has a separate code of ethics of this nature that is binding as to the same effect as the state code of ethics. But unless we're going to now change the state code of ethics to have a 2-year revolving door, then we have that particular conflict of interest, that particular type of corruption where that risk is going to be increased. So for those reasons, whether it's 2-year terms for council and 2-year terms for mayor, or 4-year terms for council and 4-year terms for mayor, it's really not something that I have a heavy preference on, whether the terms for each be 2 years or 4 years. But as a matter of avoiding issues of potential incentives for corruption that don't exist right now, I feel strongly that the terms of the council and the mayor should match up, whether that be 2 years or 4 years. I've already spoken previously on my thoughts on legislative term limits, so I won't keep you further on that, but would focus on the need for those terms, whether they be 2 years or 4 years, to match up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from the council? Councilman Lattiser?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to repeat everything I said at the last meeting regarding this. I do support changing the charter for the term limits for the mayor from what it is currently to 2 consecutive 4-year terms. I also feel, for all the reasons that I've expressed at the previous meeting, changing the city council from a 2-year cycle to a 4-year cycle with 3 cycles limits for a total of 12 years. If this body is of the mindset to continue with the 2 years, I would make a suggestion that we increase it from a 10-year term to a 12-year term. And again, for all the reasons that I stated before. So that's where I am on it, Chairman, members of the committee. My preference would be to change the city council term from 2 years to 4 years with 3 4-year terms. If that's not what the body is in the mindset to do, then I would respectfully suggest we extend out the 10-year to 12 years. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from the council? Vinnie?
Gebhardt, Councilman Gebhardt. So I, as I expressed before, I'm in favor of the 2-year term, so I'm glad to see that that's where we're at. I think the length, I'm okay with the 5 terms. 6 I'd be amenable to, but 6 I'd be amenable to, but I think as it stands is good. The one question that I have, and maybe the sponsor or members of the committee who have thought through this more might have comment on it, but is there any need to, with making this change, to segment or to have members phase off at different times, so that you don't have one period or one cycle where everyone would be up, given that we're starting this at the same time? Or do you not feel that that's a concern? That's just the one thing that struck me, right? So if we, send this to the ballot, it passes, all of us, theoretically in 5 terms from now could phase off. And to some of the comments that have been made before, I mean, there's certainly institutional knowledge and longevity that are beneficial to the entire body. So I don't think you'd want a brand, I think most wouldn't want a brand new council to come in 10 years completely fresh. So just something I was considering and wondered if you had any thoughts about.
I really don't think that is a concern. First of all, if this passes, it won't go into effect for another 2 years, and then 10 years after that would give you 12 years. And I don't think you're going to have everyone on the council staying for the 12 years so that they would all be forced out at the same time. But saying that, I definitely want to keep it as a 2-year term, but I would be open to changing it to 6 2-year terms for a total of 12 years.
I forget who introduced that, but can someone run back the logic on why to go to 6 terms? Chair.
So I know my preference would be to do any amendments after we move it to the council floor, but to each their own.
Okay. Any questions from the public?
I have one. Councilman?
Oh, 1 second. Councilwoman Travis?
I just wanted to my last 2 cents in. And basically, I don't want to repeat everything I said last time. I've been here the longest, and I got here by every 2 years. And I'm not saying that we can't change it, but I think it is good we could put limitations if you want. But don't forget, the people in your ward is the one who's voting for you. It's not all 9 of us together. The people in our ward is the ones that are voting for us to put us in our seats. Okay, and 10 years ago, I got hit with a sciatic nerve that I could not walk at all. So when the campaign time came, I wasn't going door to door, but I still worked for those people very hard, and I made sure I made my contacts with them through, campaigning, but I did not see them face to face, every one of them. And I still got elected because I did my work. And I think if you represent the people come back out for you. So the term limits, yeah, they're important, but you got to know, just as long as you're doing your work for your people, you don't have to worry about what the other wards are doing. You got to worry about your ward, because they're the ones that care to get their work done. It's not that they want to see your face every other year or every 2 years. They want to make sure you're doing what they want you to do. They want you to do the potholes in their streets. They want to make sure if they got a problem with the garbage, you're doing it. That's all I'm saying. If it's 2 years for six conservative, I think that's a good idea too. But I mean, the 4 years for the mayor, same thing, whatever.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any questions from the public?
Rob Cody, Ward 7. So here you have the classic example of the solution looking for the problem. All this benefits, this legislation benefits you people, not us. Benefit the general public in any way, shape, or form. Why do you want to try to fix something that's not broken? All this does is it eliminates 50% of the amount of time that an individual has to place a vote. And it seems to me that this council is dead set on sequestering races. We've seen it in the Finance Committee meetings. We're seeing it where once every 4 years. Is that what you want to do? It's called stagnation, and we can see that stagnation in this city council and councils prior to this. So now, have any of you guys given any thought that when you have a mayor that's for 4 years, the impact that that has on contracts? Has anybody thought about that? Has anybody thought about the fact that if the mayor or any of you council members run amok during that 4 years, that we don't have the ability to voice our opinions to get you out? I want somebody on this committee to tell me what benefit does any member of the general public get from increasing these limits and changing the city, changing portions of the city charter. I would think that if you drove around this city, you'd find enough of problems that you really should be addressing as opposed to this. I mean, this is ridiculous. You know, I'm a firm believer of term limits, and it's called the ballot box, voting at the ballot box. Mrs. Travis has been here for 20 years. You know why she's been here for 20 years? Because every 2 years, her constituents go and they cast their vote for her. And if they don't want her, she's gone. She doesn't need term limits. Nobody does. The mayor doesn't need term limits. That does not benefit the people of the city at all. And I find it interesting in the terms that you're throwing out come down to a point where everybody's at the 10-year mark and now they're going to get a pension. I defy anybody on this council to tell me what benefit that the general public has. And I don't want to hear, oh, it'll save us money because we won't have to have an election every 2 years. This city blows money like it's free. And now we want to do this. Let's limit the people's voices even more, right? So what do we have? Once a month, the entire city council, because of your generosity, has 15 minutes to split at an open mic, of which everyone hides behind Rule 41, that we can't answer anything. I have to listen to you, while most people are on their phones or doing whatever. Once every 2 years, we get to vote, and once a year we can come and ask questions on the city budget. And you've even tried to change that where probably should fix the place, you know, term limits for God's sakes. So once a year at the budget hearings, we can come, and we used to be able to speak about each line item. Now we can't. You only got 10 minutes to talk about everything in the budget. So my question is, how much more will you people be happy with by limiting the voices of the general public? Maybe we should just shut up. Maybe what would be a good idea, you have a sergeant of arms with duct tape and duct tape us all so we can't talk, because that's where this is going. This is ridiculous. And let me tell you, any council member that votes in favor of changing these term limits, wait till you see the bulldog that comes at you. And that bulldog's name is Rob Cody.
Any other questions from the public? Comments? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
So bearing in mind what I said at the last meeting, where term limits would have helped prevent the damage it'll take generations to undo to the city, move favorable action.
Second. Okay,
Mr. Chair, could you please clarify what it is you're voting on?
Oh, actually, so move to just go to the floor without a recommendation, because what we said before about we can do the amendments on the floor. Sorry, thank you.
okay, have a motion to move it to the floor without a motion, without a recommendation? Second.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Second order of business is PCR 41-22, resolution to the General Assembly supporting the installation of a Luso-Americans Veterans Monument at the Rhode Island Veterans Memorial Cemetery. Councilman Howe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very simply put, there's representation of many different backgrounds of people who served, not just identifying, like, you know, I know that for me, there's an infantry, those who served under the infantry banner, they're recognized with the monument. I know that there's quite a few monuments around that solemn ground where we offer our veterans to rest. There is not one for the Portuguese American veterans, and this is just us as a city encouraging and acknowledging that they are diligently working to put a monument and erect a monument, raise the money for a monument so that they can install one identifying the Portuguese Americans who are who have served. I was reached out by a council member in East Providence, and then a lifelong friend of mine, Father Victor Silva. He reached out and asked if I wouldn't mind sponsoring it, and I was happy to do it. So I do respectfully request favorable action. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the council?
I have a question, sir.
Council President?
If the author of the bill, if I would like to be added as a co-sponsor, if allowed.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Councilman, Chairman. Thank you.
make everyone. Okay.
Thank you all who offered to co-sponsor. Gladly accepted and appreciated.
Right, do I hear a motion? Any questions from the public? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
Move favorable action.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Third is PCR 42-22, resolution to the General Assembly requesting additional FY 2023 state budget appropriations for libraries. Council President McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was contacted by the director of the library and a number of board members of our library asking us to support additional funding for the libraries through the state. Our libraries do a number of different things. It's not just go in and rent the book anymore. They do programming for continuing education. They do programming for children, meeting places. It's really a community resource, and I ask for your support this evening.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the council? Any questions from the public? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
Move favorable action.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That concludes the Intergovernmental Committee at 6:52.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That is the last committee this evening. So we will return here at 7 o'clock for the start of the full city council meeting. So we will see you at 7 o'clock. Oh, and I also want to make one more announcement. We do have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and there is a sign-up sheet on the podium. So if you would like to speak, please sign up at the podium. Good evening, everyone. I call the April 18th, 2022 City Council meeting to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
Here.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Here.
Mr. Howe? Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Here.
Mr. Ricks?
Here.
Mr. Snappy? Ms. Travis? Here. 9 present.
Thank you. At this time, I call on Councilman Howe to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the balls bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening, everyone. We are now onto general communications. I do have one communication that is on the city website. The City Department of Human Services is now accepting applications until May 9th from nonprofit agencies serving the city of Warwick who wish to be considered for support grant funding. So if you are a nonprofit that serves the city of Warwick, please go on the city of Warwick's website, contact the Department of Human Services, and you can make an application to receive some community support grant funding from the city of Warwick. Is there anything from members of the council under general communications? Councilman Foley.
I would be remiss if we did not take a moment of silence. I really didn't realize it. Today is Patriots Day. I did realize that. My son is up at the baseball game, and my wife is babysitting 2 grandchildren tonight for them. But it was 9 years ago that the terrorists attacked the Boston Marathon, which ran today. And I would just like a moment of silence in memory of the people who lost limbs, lives, and such 9 years ago.
Thank you, Councilman Foley. If we could have a moment of silence. Thank you. Anything else under general communications, Councilman Foley? No. Councilman Ricks.
Brief announcement. The Tax Relief Commission is meeting 1 week from tonight, 5:30 p.m. in this City Council chambers. I'm hoping that after some additional public comment, we're going to be able to take a vote on recommendations. Part of that also depends on whether a certain amount of research has been finished by the administration and if they can get some numbers to us. Let's see. Aside from that, I do plan on docketing a few items. I'm not going to discuss them because that would not fall under the general communications, but I have posted on my own Facebook page some information about that. And on any of those items, I would welcome input from members of the public. Feel free to call or email. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Ricks. Councilman Lattiser.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So I want to speak to an issue that has come up more than once. And whether it's directly or indirectly spoken to or about me. And it's been said, you should call, you should do this, you should do that, should get all these answers before you come to the city council meetings. Well, certainly everyone can do what they please, can represent the people that you represent any way you choose. I intend to continue asking the questions that I ask. I intend to continue to dig into the numbers, to ask why you need this. How much do you need? Who's it coming from? Where is it going? And I intend to continue to do the majority of the people's work in asking those questions on the council floor. And the reason is, I want the members of the public, I want the people that I represent, I want them to know what those questions are that I'm asking. And equally important, I want them to know what the answers are. So when I deem it necessary, I'll make a call. But the majority of the questions I'm going to ask will be on the floor because my people need to know the questions I'm asking and the answers that I'm getting. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anything else under general communications? Okay, moving on to the agenda, executive communications, there are none. We are now on A, acceptance of the minutes from the council meeting held on April 4th. Can I have a motion, Councilman Howe?
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Gephardt and Councilwoman Travis. Okay, we're going to do a voice vote on that. In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? An abstention?
Abstain.
We have one abstention, Councilman McElroy. Next up this evening is public comment, Rule 41. After the general communications and prior to the consent calendar at each city council public hearing meeting, there shall be a 15-minute period during which citizens may comment about Warwick City government issues subject to the following stipulations. The total period of time for public comment shall be 15 minutes. Comments need to be brief in order to allow as many citizens as possible to participate. The topics for comment shall be issues directly affecting city government. City council members will not respond to questions during the public comment period. The public comment session will terminate at the expiration of 15 minutes. Waiver of this provision requires unanimous consent. This evening, we have 8 individuals who have signed up this evening. The first individual is Cindy Wilson, and the clerk will do the timing this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Lattiser, I appreciate that you want us to know the answers to the questions. The problem is that the answers get totally ignored, and just by what he just said, what we're allowed to do for this little bit of time, it's so clear that no one's really interested in what we think. But here I am, the definition of insanity. I'm doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, because I'm here to talk about Airbnb. On October of 2015, I received a threatening letter from the city of Warwick compelling me to register and do a bunch of stuff that they were making up sometimes as they went along. Some of it made sense. I complied with all of it to the tune of $3,000. I am the only Airbnb to this date that is registered. There are 63 of them. I have provided you with the names and the addresses. I've been through 3 administrations trying to get to be treated fairly. I've taken my time, my hours, drove around the city, just did it this week for an hour and a half, found two more in Oakland Beach. Just so you know, Donna, there were 6 cars in one, 2 on the road, 2 in the driveway, 2 on the grass, and the other one had 5 cars, all on the road. Why do I care? Because this is my business. And because you guys made me follow a certain thing and you didn't make everyone else, they lowered the price. So here's an example. Let's say I'm a mathematics teacher in Pawtucket and I've got a really good job. And then one year I go to apply and they say, "We're really sorry, Cindy, but we've waived the rules for teachers. You no longer need a college education. So we'll hire anybody, and these people that will work for less, you don't have a job," because that's basically what you do to me. Every time, I'm not booked this week, but there's 63 others that are mostly. And to you, Mr. Foley, I want to address you because you weren't here the day after. I nicely sent everybody an email saying that I would love to
Your time is up.
inform them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you say 10 seconds? Or no?
No, I didn't give you 10 seconds.
Okay, and you took the time off when they were,
Yes, I did.
okay. Well, Mr. Foley, you're a coward.
I please ask that public comment, the decorum will be upheld in this meeting. Next up this evening is, I believe it's Mr. Potters.
Good evening, members of the City Council, Mayor Picozzi, women and gentlemen, and citizens of the City of Warwick. Before I continue, I'd like to say I do not have any vindictive reasons to do this, even if you don't agree with me. I just want to see the City of Warwick provide the service that the taxpayers pay for. Here we go. Get ready for the ride. I believe the previous administrations are not to blame for our situation today. Our situation today is a result of what I believe is a lack of or not having a real preventive maintenance process. There is responsibility on both sides, management and labor. Again, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone or any one thing. The worst vehicle on the road today for miles per gallon is a residential waste pickup unit. The average is 3 miles to the gallon. Taking $5 per gallon of diesel, and the average amount of fuel needed for one fill-up is 50 gallons, if not more. That's a minimum of $250 per day. If the unit is in service 5 days a week, it's $1,250 per week. And for 48 weeks, comes to $60,000. This is just fuel.
You have 10 seconds, Mr. Potter.
This is just fuel, not all expenses such as oil, parts, labor, registration, and believe these costs are not realized by the meeting. I gave everyone a copy of this. I gave,
set,
you have
Mr.
two
Potter.
extras.
Sorry.
Please give them
you.
to the mayor and the DPW. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Rob Cody.
Oh, boy. I think it's stop.
I just give you the monthly update. It was 8 months ago today that in the front page of all the newspapers in Rhode Island, this came out about the unused sick time when the court documents were unveiled, which stated that the Warwick Fire Department engaged in a scheme to defraud the tax dollars. And on the front page, it was Mayor Picosi's statement. I'll read it to you from the newspaper. Mayor Frank Picosi on Friday said the city must seek restitution from the fire department. That was 8 months ago today. Nothing's been done. No one on the city council has done anything. We're just going to let it go, right? Because after all, we're flush with money. But what I did find interesting is that the two entities that engaged together to promote the scheme, which was the fire department union president and former city solicitor Peter Ruggiero, which should be held accountable, they both just gave substantial donations to this mayor. If you look on the Rhode Island Board of Elections, it was posted last week. Both those entities gave donations to the mayor. So what are the chances that the mayor is going to go after both of those entities to recoup the money that was stolen from the residents? And furthermore, why isn't this council doing it? And specifically, why isn't the chairman of the finance committee doing it? But then again, he's taken $1,000 from the fire union. 1,000. So now we know how the conflict is, why it'll never get done.
The next speaker is Leslie.
Leslie Derrick, Ward 4. I'm here to discuss the Warwick Land Trust. The Warwick Land Trust is a commission of the city. We're a municipality land trust, and everything we do is done for, I don't want to shout, okay. Everything we do is for the city. We have put in for an open space bond. We originally put it in for 15 million, and since everything has happened with the solar, which you guys can be thankful for, I mean, we can thank you for, we're down to 5 million. So we're only asking for $5 million, but we've been asking for the city to help us to get this on the ballot for November. And we have been running into difficulty getting the attention of the people that we need to get this to the mayor. I did fill out all the forms and all of the questions that were presented to me, and I've even talked to the city, the finance office, and I also found that there were many bonds that were still in the bond portfolio that have never been funded. And we have 2 million that's also in that. That's why we're only going for 5 million. So we would like to get the council's support so we can have this to the State House by May, no later. So if you would, please meet with yourselves and figure this out, because I can't keep waiting. And my husband is paralyzed. I work full time, and I'm doing this land trust. I need your help. I don't need pushback. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Nancy.
Hello, thank you. I want to urge the City Council not to accept the construction of new short-term detention cells on Jefferson Boulevard without asking some questions and taking a deeper look. The bid process for that property was the subject of a whistleblower complaint, and irregularities came up. I want to say that we tend to conflate immigration and ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. ICE is actually less than 20 years old. It's part of an increased militarization of the border, and it's also part of a conjunction with prison for profit. So what is concerning is that building short-term detention cells greases the skids for somebody to show up at the immigration office, to be kept in the cell, to be shipped off to one of the for-profit detention centers in New England. And this happens. There is a case that was infamous in Central Falls about 20 years ago. What is concerning is that this kind of thing still happens because prison for profit requires a steady supply of bodies. And ICE requires also to have a steady supply of our federal tax money. So it's not free money. It is our tax money, and we are also responsible for what is done with it. So I'm just requesting that Warwick not accept the construction of new detention cells on Jefferson Boulevard without asking for transparency and an explanation of why they believe
10
this is
seconds,
needed.
please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me, can I just get your name for the record, please? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Nancy Green, and I did grow up in Warwick.
Nancy Green?
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Nathan.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Levin Aspensen. I am an organizer with Never Again Rhode Island, and during the day, I am a grant writer for a mental health agency. So my colleagues are going to hear me repeat myself a little bit because I'm somewhat of a broken record when it comes to discussions of mental health and the worsening crisis that is going on here in Rhode Island. And specifically, my testimony tonight will concern the local costs that will be borne if the city of Warwick allows the property at 443 Jefferson to be renovated from a former bank building into a temporary ICE jail. How bad do you think the state of mental health is in Rhode Island and nationwide before, during, and after the pandemic? I assure you it is worse, and it is worse for no one more than our young people. A statistic that I find particularly troubling and that I cite often because it scares me, frankly, is that suicidal ideation among youth has doubled since the beginning of the pandemic. Serious depression has tripled, serious anxiety has quadrupled. And these mental health detriments are felt even more keenly for people in racialized communities and immigrant communities, which are, of course, the communities most targeted by the agency known as ICE that has been operating in Warwick for over 20 years now, but will, with the addition of this facility, now be able to intern people who they have scooped off of the street and separated families in a series of jail cells that will be operating in an unassuming little building at 443 Jefferson Boulevard. And the mental health effects of family separation are deep, and there is mounting evidence that they are unrecoverable. They lead to deep psychological lasting scars, repressed
You have 10
development,
seconds, sir.
increased rates of PTSD, and withdrawing behavior that can persist even if the families are reunited, which is why we're here and why
All set, sorry.
I'm going to go ahead and finish up. And why this issue is going to keep reappearing in front of the city council. I'm afraid it'll be very easy. I'm wrapping up.
Your time's up.
I heard you.
Thank you.
It'll be very easy for this council to rush
We
into
have
this issue.
to stick with the rules.
We will not let you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm sorry, we do have to stick with the rules. Thank you very much for your, taking the time. The next speaker is Newton. I apologize if I got the name wrong.
Could you please state your name for the record, please? Nope, just bring that mic right down.
Newton?
Do you have a last name?
Brophy. Brophy,
Got it,
B-R-O-P-H-Y.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm back. I was here back in autumn about the ice facility that's being built on Jefferson. I'll save everyone the time, but since then we've sort of been tossed between here and the zoning board and the planning board. That seems pretty standard for local government, so I'm just going to talk about active and passive participants. The reason why is because the historical context that me and my fellow organizers work with is that of the Third Reich, and both types of participants are necessary for those events to take place. And I just
Should be.
I apologize for the mic difficulties this evening.
Just as an example, there were, you probably wouldn't have seen it because I scraped them off, but there were stickers around here for Prohibit Front, which was formerly known as Vanguard America, which was a neo-Nazi group that participated in Charlottesville. I understand that the representatives here have constituents that they need to represent, and I also understand that there are demographics in this area that support those types of things like white ethnostates. And those are the types of people that really like ICE. And then the passive participants are the people who aren't actively helping. So we're probably going to be back again. If you're not actively helping us, you're kind of just in our way.
Thank you. And the last speaker this evening is Sasha.
Hi, do you need my name for the record too?
I just need your name up for the record, please.
Sasha Berkoff, Berkoff.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm also here, as you can tell by my shirt, to talk about 443 Jefferson Boulevard. 443 Jefferson Boulevard is a jail, an ICE jail that is being built, or actually might actually have finished construction by now, on in our own city of Warwick. And the reason that it was allowed to be built is because it wasn't zoned as a jail, despite the fact that it has jail cells. So we went to the zoning board and we said, why was this allowed to happen? The zoning board said, I don't know, maybe check with city council. So we went to city council and we said, why was this allowed to happen? And city council said, I don't know, maybe check with the zoning board. Zoning board sent us back to the city council. We've got sent to the planning board. We've been sent around and around. And meanwhile, the only reason we found out this was being constructed in the first place is because some construction workers leaked plans for the document that showed that there was going to be detention facilities built into the building. Why doesn't everyone in Warwick, why doesn't everyone in Rhode Island know that we're building a jail here in Warwick, Rhode Island for ICE detention? Our group, Never Again Action, fights ICE detention in our state in every way we can. So of course we're against this facility. But I think that anybody in Warwick would be against having a jail right on Jefferson Boulevard, right next to businesses where they go every day, where they do their banking, where they do their shopping, near where they live. Why is this going forward, and why isn't the city council doing anything to stop it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we apologize again for the technical difficulties. I know poor Phil is working, sweating through his suit there trying to fix it, so thank you, Phil. Next up
Mr.
is...
Mr. President?
We have to move on because there's no response.
No, I'm not looking to make a response. I'm asking for a request. I'd like to just have a minute to give my card to Mr. Potter. I think he's got some things here that
Councilor,
I would like to
you're getting
follow up
waved
on.
off here. We can't respond to anything under Rule 41. So we can get you Mr. Potter's contact information to reach out. Number one this evening is the consent calendar is PCR 44-22, a resolution relative to bids. Committee report, finance.
Move favorable action.
For action, Councilman Howe.
Favorable action.
Second by Councilman Gephardt. Go ahead, Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2023-026 network connectivity. 2022-406 State of Rhode Island telephone services. 2023-027 police radio circuits. 2022-409 renovations and repairs of therapy pool. 2022-199 reservations and repairs therapy pool. 2022-407 correction. 2022-407 State of Rhode Island Data Communication Services Help Desk. 2023-007 veterinary services. 2023-008 animal shelter food and cat litter. 2022 simulation training, correction, Mr. President, 2022-403 simulation training ammunition. 2022-358 purchase wheel balance for police garage. And 2022-404 State of Rhode Island air compressor maintenance, repair, and installation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any questions that were not asked earlier this evening in the Finance Committee meeting? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. The clerk will call a roll for favorable action on PCR 44-22.
Ms. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, consent passes.
Thank you. The consent calendar passes. Councilman Howe, I believe there was one item removed.
Yes, Mr. President, bid 2022-069 medical examinations for police is now PCR 45-22.
And would you like to make a motion?
Motion favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley. Go ahead, Councilman Howe.
Thank you. The amendment calls for an increase of the request from 1,800 to 3,600.
Okay, so we're moving from 1,800 to 3,600.
Yes, Mr. President.
All right, is there any questions from members of the council? Oh, I need a second on the amendment. Councilman Foley, second. Are there any questions on the amendment? Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action on the amendment.
Ms. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? Yes. 9 yes, motion passes.
Okay, the amendment passes. Thank you very much. Councilman Howe.
Move PCR 45-22 as amended.
Second by Councilman Foley. Any questions at this time? The clerk will call a roll for favorable action as amended.
Ms. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks? Yes. Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? Yes. 9 yes as amended.
Thank you. Favorable action as amended. We are now moving into unfinished business. Number one this evening is PCR 158-21, a resolution to the General Assembly requesting an amendment of the Warwick City Charter to establish new elected term limits and term limits for mayor and council elective terms beginning January 2025. Committee report, intergovernmental.
Mr. President, the committee referred it to the floor without a recommendation.
Okay, so to move forward, we do need to get a recommendation? Yeah, would you like to move favorable? We'll get a second and we can have a discussion.
I would like to move favorable action, Mr. President.
Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Foley. Okay, so now Councilman McElroy.
I would start off by saying I would like to introduce an amendment. I would like to change the terms for the city council to 6 two-year terms.
Okay, so Councilman McElroy has made an amendment to change the term of city council will stay at 2-year terms for a total of 6 terms.
Yes.
Okay, do we have a second on that amendment? Second by Councilman Foley, Councilman Ricks. Okay, any discussion on this item? Councilman Ricks.
I'm still really not pleased with the state of this legislation. However, I would say that this is a move in the right direction. So while I would reserve my right to vote differently, of course, on different amendments that may be proposed, I would first support this because I do see this as a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gephardt.
I'll just put to my colleagues, I'm still listening for a reason to do this, to support this. So if anyone has it, chime in.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm actually going to side with Councilman Gebhardt on this, and I think I was really happy to hear one of our speakers who spoke on it agrees with me and pretty much echoed what I said, that I do believe that 2-year terms are the way to go. It keeps it local. It's a ward issue. It keeps us moving. It keeps us connected. And the number one, the best way for term limits is up to the voters. And I do believe that on the legislative side. I plan on voting against the 6-term, 2-year terms, 6 2-year terms, because I don't believe term limiting the legislature can be 100% effective. Am I 100% on board, with wanting to vote against it? No. But I do believe that it is the citizens who are the number one term limit. Like, they're the ones who decide the term limits. And it also keeps with the people who truly believe in, and I will go to Councilwoman Travis, people who believe in her service. She believes in serving her community, and she's done it effectively for 20 years. It is not the person, it is not the term, but it is the people, and the people can get rid of that. So respectfully, I will vote against this and propose a second amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other council people? Again, we have an amendment that was moved and seconded, so that is what's being discussed at this time. So it would be the mayor, as what is being proposed, would change to a 4-year term. 2 4-year terms would be the term limit for mayor. The change of the amendment that's proposed right now is keep the city council for 2-year terms for up to 6 terms, which would be 12 years on the council. So that is what is being debated at this time. Anybody else that hasn't had a chance to speak yet? Like to speak? No? Councilman Ricks.
To clarify, I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything as to the amendment. Was, from what you were saying, Council President, was this amendment to only change the current legislation from the city council having 5 consecutive 2-year terms to 6 consecutive 2-year terms, or did this amendment also propose to change the terms of the mayor to 4 2-year consecutive terms?
I can ask the sponsor or the solicitor.
No, the amendment is only to change the terms and the number of the councils from 5 2-year terms to 6 2-year terms. You were right, Councilman.
Councilman Lattiser hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Councilman Lattiser. Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I had said at the last meeting and the beginning of this meeting, my preference would be to have 3 4-year terms for the city council. With the risk of being repetitive, I'm just going to put it out there again, what my reasoning is for that. And I understand that it's the people that send us back or send us away. I understand that. And a lot of that has to do with how each of us as an elected official works in their ward. As I said earlier, I don't need an election to campaign. I don't need to put up campaign signs. I don't need to constantly have fundraisers to represent my people. as opposed to every 16, 17, 18 months being out there doing this campaign thing, I would much rather spend my time taking care of the people's business, my people's business, which I can assure you, I'm out there 7 days a week. This is certainly not a part-time job for any of us. It may be part-time pay, but it's not a part-time job. I don't think anyone approaches this as such. In terms of productivity, I would much rather spend my time dealing with the issues that my constituents either don't know how to deal with, don't know who to contact, don't know how to get things done. They're frustrated. I look at a phone call or a text or an email from a constituent. If that person had to go through the time and effort to find out who their council person is, assuming that one doesn't know, get the contact information, pick up that phone and call you or call me, I'll speak to myself, and say, hey, Ed, there's a tree branch, it's a problem. There's a pothole, it's a problem. I take every single call that comes in. I look at it as for this person to go through the trouble of contacting me, and in many instances, after a lot of frustration of not being able to get these things taken care of, to them, that's a major issue. And I treat it as such. I treat it as a major issue. Saturday morning, I happened to be out at a client's house, and an individual came across the street to speak to me about an issue. That's what I want to spend my time doing. For me, I would rather be able to put as much time as I can into trying to help and solve the problems of my constituents as opposed to campaigning every 2 years. As far as I'm concerned, I campaign every day, 365 days a week. My people can get a hold of me anytime they need. My phone number's out there. It's very public. My cell phone's out there. I don't need to campaign every 2 years because I do it every day. Having said that, I also appreciate the fact that we're in the spirit of compromise on this particular bill. And I would like to thank the chair for his willingness to make that amendment for the 6 consecutive 2-year terms. Do I think is it the way I would like to absolutely see it? Probably not. But it is something that I can concur with and I will support. So in the absence of support for 3 4-year terms, I will be supporting the 6 consecutive 2-year terms. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Latta, sir. Any other comments from any individuals? Councilman Howe.
Just for clarification to the president, to the solicitor through the president, if you don't mind. We are voting now just on the amendment, correct? The extending from a 5-year term limit to a 6-year term limit, 2 year per term.
Yes, what the council has before it at this time is changing the word 5 to 6 in the 2 places that it exists. And the substantive implication of that is changing from limited to 5 2-year terms to 6 2-year terms. That is the only item that's before it that's been moved in second. And on the amendment after this, we'll go back to any other discussion or amendments if there are any.
Thank you, solicitor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Anybody else that hasn't had a chance to speak? Councilman Latta, sir.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I would like to make one more point too. So if this body were to approve the amendment and pass this as amended, it's important to realize and remember that we don't have the final say on this. That is key. That is very, very important. And it's very important to the comments that one of our speakers made this evening. And I get it, I understand it, and I respect that. But I would point out that we are not the final say. We're sending our recommendation to the General Assembly. The General Assembly is going to have their say on this, and assuming they support what the consensus is of this legislative branch of government, it goes before the voters. The voters are ultimately going to make that final decision. Do they want the term limits that have been suggested? Do they want 2 4-year terms for the mayor? Do they want 6 2-year terms for the members of the city council? So I absolutely concur. They can vote us in, they can vote us out. They also have the opportunity at the ballot box to finally, and I say finally because this is something that's been kicking around for a very long time, with members of the public saying term limits, term limits, term limits. And we can all understand a lot of those frustrations. This will give the voters the opportunity to say, yes, we want term limits, or no, we like it the way it is. And I'd like to hear from the voters. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. First, clarification for our council solicitor. So with the amendment, I know that we've often been abbreviating it 5-year term, 5 2-year terms versus 6 2-year terms, but really implied in all of that language, we're keeping the word consecutive so that the term limit is either in the original as it is right now, 5 consecutive 2-year terms, or as proposed to be amended, 6 consecutive 2-year terms, meaning that if there is a gap between terms of service, then there can be a new set of 5 consecutive 2-year terms or 6 new consecutive 2-year terms. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I would just, in a brief response to Councilman Lattiser, point out that between the last meeting, this meeting, and I believe one email that was sent to all council members, the public participation on this so far that I've heard is all 3 comments were opposed to term limits, and I have not yet heard any comments before the city council or emails sent to us all that were in favor of the term limits. So just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I think everyone has gotten a chance. So I'm just going to have the solicitor one more time read the amendment, and then I will call the vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment before you is to change page 2 on lines 10 and 19 by deleting the word 5 and inserting the word 6. It will read, the operative term would be, and shall service on the city council be limited to 6 consecutive 2-year terms exclusive of service prior to January 2025 and any partial terms of less than 1 year.
Okay, so the clerk will call the roll for favorable action on the amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy? Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? Yes. 9 yes to amend.
Okay, so the amendment passes. So Councilman McElroy, do you have a motion
Favorable action.
as amended?
Point of order, if I, point of order.
Hold on one second, everyone, hold on one second.
You dang lawyers.
Point of order, we do have to offer opportunity for other individuals to make amendments. Thank you for pointing that out. So are there any comments on, of members of the council would like to make or amendments? Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. For the reasons I expressed in the committee, the importance of the terms of the mayor, the length of the terms in particular, matching up to the terms, the length of the terms of the city council, I would suggest that I'm going to make this a motion for an amendment that I'm open for debate on whether the terms for the number of terms for the mayor should be changed. But for now, I'll make my motion such that the terms and term limit for the mayor should reflect the same for the city council. Therefore, my motion would be for the term for the mayor to be at 2 years, which would be what it of course is right now. And since the term limit for the city council is 6 two-year terms, I would suggest as this motion, 6 two-year terms for the mayor, all consecutive, that is, mirroring the city council.
Okay, so the Councilman Ricks has made an amendment. Is there a second to that amendment? Is there a second to that amendment? Okay, there is no.
This is not a second. Can you just repeat the amendment, please?
Currently, as to the mayor, it's 6 terms of 2 years consecutive.
For both the mayor and the city council.
Correct. Specifically, this motion would just be as to the mayor, since the version as amended already applies to the city council.
Councilman Ricks, if you, just so I have it correct and members can understand, my understanding of your amendment is to change the item before us, which is the recently amended item, such that you'd be reflecting the terms of the mayor to be 2 years rather than the current 4 years. And you would apply the same limitation that is currently situated in the item for the council, which is 6 consecutive 2-year terms would be your intention. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So there is a motion. Is there a second?
Is there a second? There is no second, so the motion fails. Is there any other comments or motions that members of the council haven't got a chance to speak yet? No. Councilman Ricks?
In the absence of support for that, I would suggest 4 consecutive terms of 2 years for the mayor. So instead of 6 total terms consecutive of 2 years, I'm now proposing this amendment be 4 terms of 2 years, which would be consistent with the 8 years of the current legislation as amended.
Thank you, Mr. President, Councilman. Councilman Ricks is looking to amend the item situated before you in a similar manner as the prior amendment. However, the limitation on terms of the mayor would be 4 2-year terms rather than the prior amendment, 6 2-year terms. So the mayor, the implications would be the mayor would have the opportunity for 4 consecutive 2-year terms if this amendment is seconded and adopted.
Do we have a second to the motion? Do we have a second to the motion? Seeing there's no second, the motion dies. Is there any other amendments or motions that council members would like to make? Hearing none, Councilman McElroy.
I move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Howe, Councilman Foley. I'm just going to have the solicitor lay out exactly what we're voting on. There was a lot of discussion, so he's going to lay out exactly what is before the city council at this time.
So Councilman McElroy is moving favorable action as amended on PCR 15821. The only amendment that has been adopted this evening is changing the limitation on consecutive 2-year terms for the council from being 5 to being 6. So otherwise, it is the item that was drafted in front of you that you reviewed prior to and during the meeting.
Thank you, Solicitor. Are there any other questions? Yes, I was seconded by Councilman Foley, Councilman Howe at that time. Okay, are there any questions that haven't been asked before? Okay, and I just want to put a finer point on one of my colleagues. They said that ultimately, if this were to move forward, the voters will decide. This is one of the steps here. So the clerk will call the roll for favorable action as amended.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? Yes. 8 yes, 1 no. Amendment passes.
The motion passes. Thank you. Next up is number 2 this evening is PCR 39-22, which is now 2022-339, Fire Department promotional exams. Before we take a motion, I'm going to ask the solicitor to make a statement.
Thank you, Council President, members of the council. During the committee this evening, there was a question raised about the Munis report and the title on the account number. We can confirm to you that in the current fiscal year budget that this is being drawn from, the title on the account is accurate. And when the Munis report was pulled, it was not done in the normal way such that it drew an incorrect line item on the report. I have received from the administration and the council liaison an updated copy of the report as it is, and it denotes the same titling of the account. That said, this is to inform you that that issue has been reconciled, but furthermore, the account number never changed, and so all the information that you reviewed is about the specific account number that has those funds within it. So it is appropriate to move forward for whatever the council pleasure is. We just want to update you on that situation.
Thank you, Solicitor Walsh. So first, we got to get a recommendation, second, and then we'll take questions. So committee report on PCR 39-22, which is now 2022-339, Finance.
Favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley. Okay, questions on this?
Can we just,
Councilman Gephardt.
since we had to look at the incorrect report, can we just, would you mind swinging that around so we can put eyes on it?
Happy to.
I don't know why. Joanne just came running down. There she is.
Yes, she's.
Get those steps in.
So just for the audience and members at home, the question that was brought up earlier this evening has been reconciled, and the solicitor has said that we can freely move forward if that's the council's choosing. Yeah. And so we have a motion that's been moved as favorable action. It has been seconded. Are there any questions on this item that were not discussed earlier this evening in committee? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. The motion passes. We are now moving on to new business. Number one is PCO 8-22, an ordinance prohibiting parking on the northerly side of Narragansett Bay Avenue. This is a committee report ordinance. For action, Councilman Lattiser.
I move favorable action on PCO 8-22 for first passage.
Seconded by Councilwoman Travis and Councilman Howe. Any questions or comments that were not asked earlier this evening in the Ordinance Committee? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, first passage.
Thank you. The motion passes. Number two this evening is PCR 41-22, committee report, intergovernmental.
Favorable action, Mr. President.
For action, Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilwoman Travis, Councilman Lattiser, and Councilman McElroy. Go ahead, Councilman Howe.
Mr. President, are we on PCR 41-22?
Correct.
Okay, I apologize. Thank you. Move favorable action.
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded. I didn't know if you had any additional comments.
We're ahead of you.
I have an agenda that has a different item as item number 2. So I'm looking at item number 3.
New business you're looking at.
I am.
We're looking at the incorrect agenda.
Okay. So I request favorable action, and Mr. President, I'm happy to say that the council came on and co-sponsored the legislation.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
As mentioned, the entire council has been added as a co-sponsor. Thank you, Councilman Howe. Any other additional, Councilman Lattiser?
I think you already answered it, but I was just going to ask to be put on as a co-sponsor, but you got us
Yes,
all on.
the entire council.
Sounds
Thank you.
good.
Any other additional questions? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Number 3 this evening is PCR 42-22, a resolution to the General Assembly requesting additional FY 2023 state budget appropriations for libraries. Committee report, intergovernmental.
Favorable action, Mr. President.
For action, if Councilwoman Travis, could you move that for me, please?
I move favorable action on PCR-42-22.
Second by Councilman Lattiser. Any questions? I believe this also has the full council as co-sponsors as well. Any additional questions or comments on this item? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. The motion passes. We're now moving to unanimous consent. Ward 1, anything under unanimous consent? Ward 2?
Pass.
Ward 3?
Pass.
Ward 4?
Pass.
Ward 5?
Pass.
Ward 6?
Pass.
Ward 7 passes. Ward 8? Ward 9?
Pass.
Councilwoman Travis.
If there be no further business of this honorable body, I move to a docket session.
Yeah, I don't have that on my thing. We just have one referral and advertising. I apologize. So for, sorry, for the referral and advertising, PCO 9-22, an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan of the City of Warwick, AR Building Company is the petitioner. And also PCO 10-22, an ordinance amending the zoning of the City of Warwick, AR Building Company petitioner. Now, if I can get a motion from the Councilwoman Travis. That's on the amended
On the amended
docket.
agenda.
That's the mistake.
It was on the amended
On the
docket, amended agenda.
The agenda was amended after the.
I have, was there 2 amendments? Because I have an amended version here in my binder
The
It says
official, the
amended.
official document was posted on April 13th, 2022. This is the amended one that we are using that is before for the public this evening. So the last order of business here is this referral and advertising. It is just an announcement.
Okay, Mr. President, my point is, I'm looking at the amended version. How many amendments do we have? Okay. All right, fine, that answers the question. Thank you.
So Councilwoman Travis, one more time, if you could move us into the docketing session. What's that? If you could move us to the docketing session one more time.
Just doing it. All right, going to move to a docket session.
All in favor? Aye. We are now in the docket session. Ward 1, anything to docket?
No, thank you.
Ward 2.
4 items. First, resolution to the General Assembly to enact legislation authorizing the City of Warwick to issue not to exceed $5 million general obligation bonds, notes, and other evidences of indebtedness to finance the purchase of open space and improvements of such open space, all in the City of Warwick, and with the favorable recommendation of the Warwick Land Trust, and all such open space to be held in the name of the Warwick Land Trust.
Finance.
Second item, ordinance eliminating eligibility for pensions for elected officials in Warwick who are not yet elected and vested.
Finance.
Third, resolution to the General Assembly requesting amendment of the Warwick City Charter, Article 3, Section 3-3, to require, quote, advice and consent, end quote, of the Warwick City Council for appointment of certain officers and employees of the city.
Intergovernmental.
Fourth and finally, resolution seeking a fiscal note from the Finance Director of the City of Warwick relative to the potential cost to the city of increasing the amounts provided to low-income and/or disabled homeowners through the circuit breaker exemption.
Okay, intergovernmental. Anything else, Councilman Ricks?
That's all.
Ward 3.
Pass.
Ward 4.
Pass.
Ward 5.
Yes, I have 2. One is a resolution to the General Assembly, and it's a resolution requesting amendment of the Warwick City Charter to expand the composition of the school committee in 2025 from 5 to 9 members. And I have an attachment to go along with it.
Intergovernmental.
The second one is, again, a resolution to the General Assembly requesting the service on the Warwick School Committee shall be limited to 3 consecutive 4-year terms exclusive of service prior to January 2027 and any partial term of less than 2 years previously served.
Councilman, could you distinguish the 2 items for me again?
Sorry?
Could you distinguish the 2 items?
Sure. They're two separate items, 2 separate requests to the General Assembly. One is to increase the makeup of the school committee from 5 to 9 members. The second, and separate and aside of that one, is to impose or support 3 consecutive 4-year terms on the school committee, or for the school committee, I should say.
Thank you.
Intergovernmental. Ward 6. Ward 7 passes. Ward 8.
Just one resolution in regards to the installation of stop signs on Commer Road at the intersection of Rome and Capri Road at the intersection of Rome.
Public safety. Ward 9 passes. Thank you very much. Council meeting is adjourned.